Hey everybody, welcome to 24 Shades of Blue. This is Axel Vilma with Superintendent Specialized Criminal Investigations, the badass herself, Pauline Gray. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I called you badass for one reason. That's what I've heard. Internally, everybody's telling me, she's the one. She's risen through the ranks. You've been in the industry over 30 years. You've seen it all. And you're also, the fact is, you're in a male-dominated industry. You've risen up to the number one spot. How does it feel to be where you are after everything, that you've been through and that you've worked so hard to get to?
I didn't actually know what I was working towards. Because I can tell you when I first started, we always say what you see, you can be. But when I started in 1988, although there were some women in senior ranks, there wasn't a lot. So it never even dawned on me that this was possible. And then it gets to the point where you're just working. You're just working, and slowly but surely you end up in the best job in the whole city, which is what I have. And it really was sort of a natural progression. And I work for an organization that has allowed me the lateral to do crazy things, and just work my way, literally work my way to where I am now. There was nothing sort of special about it except for the fact that it was just work and work that I love. So it wasn't easy, but it was a lot of fun.
Do you think you had to work harder than most people?
I think probably in the beginning, I probably did. But again, I'm very blessed to be surrounded by both men and women who are really supportive of each other. In 1988, maybe not, but I think I was so 24 years old and so myopic that I didn't even see it. I just saw opportunity. Now, I will tell you that when I joined in 88, there weren't a lot of women. It was actually the first year that I applied. When I applied in 1987, I know you weren't even born probably then.
No.
How cute. Anyway, but that was the first year they dropped the height restriction. So I'm 5'2", and yeah, I wear very high heels. But I was like 5'2", so it was the first opportunity that I would have had to apply. Now, my sister is a police officer. She's an RCMP officer. She's a chief super in Nova Scotia. And so I did have sort of like this template right in front of me. So I was very blessed that way. But we didn't have policing in our family, so we were just sort of starting out. And so when I applied and I got hired, there wasn't a lot of women, and there certainly weren't a lot of women who looked like me, being small.
Yeah, I feel you on the height thing. I'm very short as well, so it's...
Yeah, but it's perfect. It's perfect packages, I say.
That's right.
So when I came on, within days, I did some undercover work with a little bit of instruction, and they put me out. I went out and I bought some. At the time, it was powdered cocaine. Literally on my third day, and so I was bitten by the bug, unfortunately, really early.
So badass. This is why I hear it. This is why. How?
Oh no, I was so scared. The bad guy thought I was jonesing because I was shaking so bad. So he was happy to give me the drugs because I looked like I was jonesing.
Yeah.
I was like, literally was.
You're just like you're ready. Like.
That's right. So it worked well.
I mean. Do they just throw you into an undercover? Like, how does that training for going in undercover, work? What is that like? Is it acting?
Again, it's changed so much in 3 decades. I can tell you, our undercover officers are incredibly well trained and incredibly well supported, even in the areas of wellness, which of course were words we didn't use back in 1988. But it was again a way less violent environment back then as well. So it is. It is 32 years ago. It's a really long time. So, but back then, I was very supported. I always had a backup team who I knew was always within earshot or eyeshot, gave us lots of, in the beginning, what training was available, we got. And again, just too fun. Come on.
I feel like in your other life, you were an actress, because if you're going to do undercover work, you have to have that. You can't break your cover, especially if you're trying to get in deep.
Yeah, to be quite frank, in the beginning, I was put undercover early, but I wasn't particularly good at it. So hence the reason I just went into the other areas of investigation. It was more about the lack of understanding of the criminal element, because even though the police departments or police forces at the time were opening up to women and embracing women in their ranks, certainly in the criminal element, they were not. So they were blind to us being police officers, which was our undercover, which was our cover.
Got it.
Because they had to turn their mind. And remember,
Makes sense.
a lot of those, and a lot of those places like drug dealing at the time, or any other sort of high criminal offenses, women weren't high up in it. And so again, there was a barrier there. At the time, there was very few women who could really buy up or be high in undercover. I think that's changed.
Yeah.
But that was because the criminal element was predominantly male.
The fact that times have changed and everything, like how have you seen the growth now? Like, do you like the direction that it's grown in terms of not just female, but the wellness side of everything for all law enforcement in general, not just your detectives? Like, how is that since 88 to 2021 right now? How is that different?
Incomparable. We're so mindful of wellness. Now, cops themselves have always been pretty good at looking after each other. That thin blue line, which is, it's vilified in the media these days. But in fact, the true meaning of it is that support system that has always been there. Any time in homicide where I had a child death, within seconds, there was an email, text saying, how are you? We've always been very good at taking care of each other because we had to.
Of course.
But externally and sort of corporately, we've gotten so much better at it. We're really mindful. Most of my units that fall in my command they actually required to see a service psychologist at least once a year, so that we can keep tabs on everybody, because we've recognized that the work is hard, and it's hard on you, whether you want to admit it or whether you'd like to see it or not. It's tough work. And so over years, we've really gotten really good at it.
Yeah. I mean, and I that's what I've heard, as we've been doing the podcast as well. I've also gone to think about the detectives who are doing, days on end, sometimes work at a time. Is that super stressful or what's I would say, I know it's obviously stressful within 48 hour work, but what's that motivation to keep going?
We believe it's a blessing. Well, we really consider, I'm sure Hank spoke about the creed, and that's no greater honor to a police officer, and it's true. There's no greater honor than to investigate the death of another human being. And although we can't always stop the murder, we can sure make sure that once we are given carriage of that investigation, that it's done the very best way by the very best people.
Yeah.
And it is really what all homicide investigators, not only just with Toronto Police, but across the country, really believe at their heart.
For sure. I mean, you give proper closure. I think that's the big thing, is that to what you can do depending on it. But I think it's the fact that any closure at all to whatever extent is better than nothing, and I think that's what you're helping out with.
I agree. Closure is kind of a television manufactured thing. I don't think that people ever get closure. I think that they get answers, and answers allow people to move on, to move forward. And I don't think that, especially since the vast majority of the homicides that the homicide unit does are young people.
Yeah.
So there are more often than not, parents who have to move forward without their children. And again, I think it's the answers that assist that, certainly not the closure. It's the same thing with sexual assault victims, which, some might argue are as taxed, if not more, because they survive. They're survivors. And they themselves are left to move on through life. And so giving closure for them looks different. But again, I think having answers allows people to then put that in a box. I mean, I don't think they ever put the box down, but they put it in the box and they can move forward.
That's a great way of looking at it, because it's so true. The answers will push you in that direction. I I think one of the big things I asked Hank before, I don't know if you're down to do it. Let's just see, because Andy wouldn't do it. Andy was hosting here. I'm welcome to take this, but I asked, how would an interview that you would perform look like? And let's do a hypothetical situation. I am a perp. I am a suspect.
Oh, you watch too much American television, my
friend. What TV shows do you watch?
Cop ones.
Cop ones.
Are you asking about? I love British procedurals.
Okay, I haven't watched that.
So
one.
British procedural policing is really good. It's fun for us because they talk the same language we do. We are based in the same law, and so it makes sense to us. The American ones don't make any sense to me. And everybody in the British one looks like a human.
Yeah, like what a real person would look like.
They look like us, like hair masks, mismatch, whatever is going on. The American ones they're always so perfect. I assure you, we are not always perfect.
How much of the American, I guess, cop shows are over the top, in terms of what you see from similarities? Like what is something that you've seen that's so ridiculous that you're like, that would never happen, versus something that you've seen that's like, okay, that would make sense?
Well, 48 Hours is good. Like, that's the one I would say is the best, is the closest relating to it, and they do a nice job of that. I mean, we have very different rules of law here in Canada, and our ideology as police officers at the get-go are different. We consider ourselves guardians. They consider themselves warriors. I mean, it's much different, the point from which we start. But any of the CSI stuff is a lot of fun to watch, but is a little bit funny.
We made a bet. CSI was the one we all thought that you would say.
I just want to yell at them, turn on a damn light.
That's what I've been saying that all the time. I was like, why is nobody turning on a light? It's so dark.
And I never called a corpse baby, and I didn't, the hair was not flowing. Like, we're going into a crime scene. You're going to go into a crime scene properly attired. So yeah, all of that is, it's entertainment. It's a lot of fun. I'm grateful that that somebody has an interest. I always say that out of the top 10 television shows, 7 at the time, not so much anymore, but 7 at the time were about what we did, and none of them had any reality in what we actually did. We would bore the pants off of people if you saw how much paperwork we had to do. People would be like, oh my God. And we would never recruit anyone.
But I feel like, personally for me, obviously aside from TV shows, but I think from talking to you and Hank really opened my eyes, because if there was anything I would get into in law enforcement, I would love to be a detective. I would love to be a detective. A lot of my friends would also want to as well. So what are the things that we could look forward to, if we were to go in that role, like the fulfillment about it as well? You spoke briefly about it, but I want to know more of, what are those things that, if we're going to be giving our younger years, like in our 20s to 30s, why would we do that?
Well, as a police officer, first of all, you have to have a good basis in patrol. Like, you really do sort of need to understand your city, our city. You have to have sort of an organic appreciation of the multiculturalness of our city. You have to have an organic appreciation of what the sort of collective ideology of the city is, how we identify as a city, what's important to us, and that's the only place you get that is out on the road, driving around a scout car, doing that. But when you get that under your belt and you're ready, there really is nothing better than being a puzzle maker, and that's what you get to be. You get given one piece of a puzzle. Sometimes it has no relationship to that puzzle that you're making, but you get to do it, and they pay you for it. And you get to take, if you look at a sexual assault, or you have a victim who has suffered probably one of the worst traumas that anybody could ever suffer, and you get to take the pieces of the puzzle that he or she gives you from her perspective, or his perspective, and then move forward each little step until you find that person. Same thing with a homicide. You find a deceased person that you in life, in all likelihood, never knew. And you get to follow the tiny pieces that you are given through your own hard work and that of your teams to arrest a person for murder. You get to catch killers for a living. There's nothing better. I'm sorry. there's nothing better than being a detective, being, really having people entrust in you this really their very worst day of their life, entrusting you with their perspective of it, with their family, with it. It really is a blessing to be given that privilege of finding and working for that family, finding and working for that survivor, finding and working for, the teller of a holdup who has gone to work that day. She's just gone in to do her regular shift, and before the end of it, she has been held at gunpoint and so we can't always make it perfect, but we can make that situation better by doing our work ethically, properly, professionally. Like, it's just the coolest ever. And after 32 years, as you can see, I still love it. I still love it.
It sounds so interesting and so fun. The fact that you're right, it is a huge privilege because, let's say I put myself in a victim's role. I look to you, I would look to you, to the detectives. What else can we do? Maybe we don't understand. We don't have the skill sets. We're not like Liam Neeson to go and take matters into our own hands and do our thing like that.
No.
We're here to look at, very, very professional and skillful people like yourselves who've been doing it for so long to catch these little things and help us in the worst time of our life. So I think that's such a huge honor that you do. And I think more people should be at least striving to go towards that, because there are unfortunately killers out there. And I think the more help, how is the ranks right now? Are you looking for more people to join up, or how is it in COVID especially in COVID?
Yeah, COVID is interesting because investigative work is very intimate work. It's not unlike your work.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it works better when you're face to face, I'm sure. And for us, especially in your interviews, picking up on the energy in the room, picking up on slight body movements, picking up on the nuances of a person's story are so much better when you are face to face. A lot of things, even with our victims or our victims' families, survivors' families, is we spend a lot of time sitting on their couch, talking to them, being that support for them. And it's really, really hard for us when we don't have that available to us. It's tough, but the people who work for this command are incredible. They surprise me every day. They come to work, they're goofballs, they're funny as heck. And they really do just get it done. They really have not missed a beat. It took a couple seconds, and they just said, "Cops do this really well, right? Cops do this really well." Like one day, okay, pandemic, all right, we got this.
Yeah.
And they just do it.
Wow.
It is fascinating. It's fascinating. But yeah, I find that there's a bit of a lull in young officers wanting to become investigators. Not even, I say detectives, but detectives at all ranks. So detective sergeant, all of those. And I can't tell you that I know the reasons why. It is not just a Toronto problem. It is a global problem.
Really?
I teach at a number of venues, and often we ask at the end of the day or the end of the seminar because it's usually police officers I have the privilege of talking to. We ask who is having difficulty with bringing people into the ranks, and I will tell you 100%. 100%. I've had people from Barbados, India, everywhere around the world on some of my courses, and they are all struggling with drawing people into that investigative work. And it's probably what we call a constellation of factors.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard work, and you're gone a long time. I'm sure Hank told you. We go out on a homicide, and you may not come back for 48, 50 hours, and you're gone a lot. And so I think that back in the day when they were the big city dicks in the sweeping coats and the fedoras, their spouses, their wives were at home.
No, for sure.
And so now we, especially in Toronto, we're blessed to attract, all manner of people to be policing. And so we have men and women, we have people who identify as different genders, and we have different, home situations. And so everybody's working.
Yeah.
So it's hard to be gone for 2 days.
Of course.
And the work is really, you really have to have, I don't like to say you have to stomach for it, because that's a bit old school, but you have to have the resilience for it.
I think
You
that's
have
it.
to feel it.
It's the resilience, and that's what I see a lot of you and Hank, you know, and at least the detectives that I've met, is that there's this underlying drive and the resilience to, you know, to work that heavy for a goal. And I think the thing is, you know, it might be Hollywood's problem showing it off in this weird way, or not showing the real hours, or not showing also the gratitude that you get out of it. It's just more the action rather than what is the end goal that you really feel and what you take from it, which is what you've described as something that's really, you know, indescribable.
I agree. And I think we've also done a poor job ourselves in policing generally across the country at sort of telling our own story. We are getting better at it, as we're doing right now.
Yeah.
But before, you know, this was unheard of a decade ago or 15 years ago, at sort of telling our stories, showing our vulnerabilities, or more importantly, showing how proud we are of the work that we do, and actually letting people in, being more transparent as to why we do what we do, when we do it. And as a result, you know, transparency brings trust. And we have trust in the community now, way more than we used to. And so certainly here in Toronto, I can tell you, it's not perfect. We work on it every day, but trust in the community. And so they are coming forward with their stories, and we are better trained. We're better trained in trauma. We are trauma response trained, and we know how to do business with our survivors and our victims' families. And I think we need to continue to do a better job at telling people our stories, our perspectives, and demystify some of the work.
I think that's it. It's demystifying everything. And I think that's why, you know, this podcast really exists too, is that we're having just a conversation. We're hanging out, me and Pauline, we're doing our thing, and we're just chatting, because I think there's a lot of things in the world, right? There's this huge veil, right? The media hypes it up to be this thing, or what it might be or might not be. And then until you really get a conversation happening is when, you know, the real trust can happen, because we hear, like you said, the vulnerabilities, you know, what are the lows, what are the highs? And it's something that we can all relate to, because nobody has a perfect life. Everybody has lows. And I think that's where we're going to relate to, because long hours, you've seen so many things. I mean, you specialize operations, homicide, sex crimes, hold up, forensic identification, everything from what I've seen. You also work with one of the hottest things that I'm hearing right now, which is sex trafficking or human trafficking. And I know sex trafficking is a category of that, but I would love to move into that and talk about, you know, how is that, how are those numbers progressing in this COVID environment?
Well, the COVID environment has slowed us down a little bit, which in our business is a good thing.
Yes.
You know, we're the only business that's trying to put themselves out of business. And it has slowed down, but it hasn't slowed down as much as one would think, because it's not something that happens in the light of day. It is always covert. And so COVID is but a minor bump for them. But they continue. The traffickers continue to do their trade, and quite frankly, demand doesn't stop either, which is something we rarely talk about. We talk a lot about the traffickers, and we talk a lot about the, generally speaking, women who are trafficked, who are victims of this. But we rarely talk about demand, about the people who are purchasing.
Yes.
Purchasing these, quite frankly, young girls for sex. Full stop.
Yeah.
And doing it purposely looking for young women. And I mean young. We're not talking about, when they say underage women, it is a misnomer. There is no such thing. If you are underage, you are a girl. You are a little girl. And so women are women. Women are grown. They're over 18, or, you know, that's what we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about school age children.
Oh my God.
Being trafficked
to
prominently men looking for their sexual services. I think it makes people uncomfortable. I think it makes people shift in their seats. You're shifting.
I'm shifting. Of course. Yeah.
It's an uncomfortable topic, and so we don't talk about it, because demand, quite frankly, looks like the fella who's sitting on the bus beside you.
That you never know.
Like your mom.
Yeah, you never know.
Just don't know. You just don't know. So we spend a lot of time talking about how to identify the traffickers. We spend a lot of time talking about how to identify children, generally speaking, who are at risk of being trafficked. But we don't spend any time talking about what what demand looks like, and specifically if you are a person who is using the sexual services of a child, you think that we don't see you, but we do. We do.
What are the things that you've seen that some victims will have to do in order to, I guess, get past the situation? And I say that very loosely.
Yes, getting past it is because human trafficking comes with other. If and when we're able to rescue somebody from sex trafficking, human trafficking, they often come out of it with addiction, certainly mental health challenges. So just like an addict would have to become clean, just like somebody who had mental health challenges would have to work to be whole or be well. I mean, that survivor has to do them all at the same time. They have this huge amount of baggage that they leave that relationship with, or they would leave that lifestyle with, and it's very hard psychologically, very, very hard to come out and not go back again. Often, like addiction, relapses.
Yeah.
So it's tough. It's very, very tough, and I don't think that people recognize the prevalence of it. Last year alone, we had 225 since the HT office that falls under sex crimes here began in 2014, they have had 225 victims that they have rescued where they have laid charges. And these are not people that, again, media portrays it as this, international, and you see The Wire, they come in a crate, and that's not the reality. The reality is it's the girl next door.
Yeah.
It's your daughter, it's your niece, that's who they are. And these predators move amongst us. And unless we turn our minds to those young women in our life, I say young women, there are some young men, but generally it's young women. If we don't turn our minds to assisting them to not head into that life, then we are going to be in a lot of trouble.
I think that's part of, the problem is I think there needs to be more media around that. You're right. It's people are super uncomfortable with hearing these things because they don't want to hear it. Nobody wants to hear things like this, where's the possibility of their younger child that, is very, very underage, your little girl be in these situations. But unfortunately, it's a reality. There was a Netflix show. There was a Netflix show that was on, and it was a huge controversy about it. I think it was with young girls, portraying themselves and being in those situations. And it got a lot of feedback where, people are going to unsubscribe from my Netflix account because they're underage. But, I was speaking, with my girlfriend. We're saying, unfortunately, this is the reality. This is just reality. And people aren't ready for that because they're in their little bubble of, whatever it may be. If it's like nice town suburbia where they don't see that these things exist, even in the nice town suburbia that they don't even know about. So I really think we're all programmed by, what we see, what the media tells us. But when there's the lack of things like what you're speaking about, if we don't see them or hear about it, then it's hard for us to even catch, I guess, those instances. And that leads me into my next question, which is for our, our ladies, generally the ladies, but also our males too, who are possibly in these situations. What can we look out for that can keep us, I guess, or what are those tips and tricks to keep us safe from being trafficked?
Well, I think a lot of it falls to parents, caregivers, aunts, uncles, sisters, brothers to just keep your eyes open. I think the best way to keep a young person from falling into human trafficking is to inoculate them against it. And doing that is, a young lady who is self-confident, who is surrounded by people that she has communication with. Communication with them is key. So that you are the first person they come to if something is amiss. It's not on the people getting brought into gangs. If they're looking for somewhere to belong, if they don't feel like they belong somewhere, these guys are predators, right? They're predatorial. They can sense when somebody is feeling badly about themselves or feeling badly about their situation, and they will strike. They usually portray themselves as, as a new boyfriend or as a new suitor. And, it's very intoxicating to a young girl to have, generally speaking, an older person think that they're beautiful and think that they're smart and funny and that their art is fabulous or their dance is fabulous, because at that age they feel like all of us did, awkward and not like we belong anywhere, and we don't think anybody understands us. And if we don't have someone to talk to in our immediate circle, these predators, these traffickers will sense that, and they will fill in where that gap is.
Yeah.
And it is sometimes they're very patient. They're very patient. They will wait 2 weeks, 2 months, but they will eventually bring that young lady over, and before you know it, they're no longer the girlfriend. They are working for them, and they may make it sound rather romantic and edgy in the beginning, but it is nothing of the sort. So as people who have young ladies in our family or of our circle, I would say social media. Keep an eye on their social media. As much as a 13-year-old does not want you looking at what she's looking at, it's our job. It really is our job. And so things that people wouldn't dream of, like seeing if their Wi-Fi has been feeding off the hotels.
Wow.
If your 14-year-old if you see the Wi-Fi connections are with local hotels, I mean, there may be, if she works in catering, that's fine. But if she doesn't, then there is certainly a questions to be asked. And it's our duty to keep them safe, and by keeping them safe, we have to ask those hard questions. And you talked about uncomfortable. I think a lot of that is that these are hard questions. Look at the Google history of them. Are they searching terms that they didn't understand about STDs, about infections, about sexual practices that, generally speaking, 13 and 14-year-olds wouldn't have the terminology for? And so they're searching because they too are they're being taught something, and they're learning. So these are all things. Who are they talking to? Well, we laugh, but my parents, and I suspect yours as well, needed to know who your friends were.
All of them. All of them.
Yeah, and if you were an immigrant like myself, their parents.
Yeah.
You had to know who the parents were. And then my dad would say, "And what do they do for a living?"
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
what's their place look like? Everything. Where are they from? Yeah, all that. Mm-hmm.
And we don't need to do it that far, where that's seriously old school.
Very.
But there is something to be said. If your child does not know their new friend by anything more than a nickname, that is a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
It's a red flag. And there's some old school stuff that does work. Any of your new friends, I have to meet first.
Yeah.
I need to know them. Because I will guarantee you they won't come. They won't come. So and just as a caveat, they're not always men traffickers, right? that media driven idea that the trafficker is this man, and it's not true. Often the recruiters are women.
Yeah.
And women, and again, a young 15-year-old girl who feels quite lonely is more likely to go, and especially this new 21-year-old or 18-year-old girl who seems really hip, seems really cool, has got the best of the best. It's intoxicating.
Of course.
It's intoxicating. And so we really have to do a good job at sort of being that other side. And again, I can't say it enough. Communication is key. Talk about sex, again, for a whole generation is still hard. You have to have those conversations with your kids early and often, so that they're comfortable in coming to you right away, and that's the inoculation to keep them out of that light. Absolutely,
those are amazing tips, and I hope everybody out there, especially our parents and guardians that are out there, please do listen to these, and unfortunately, please ask these hard questions, because I think we'd all rather ask a hard question than rather go through a hard situation, after. So thank you so much, Pauline. I think I want to leave you on one last note before you go. Please give a shout out to any future detectives out there that do want to be what can they do? How do they get to, how can they get to that position? What are the steps moving forward? And then, yeah.
Well, I can say show an interest. at your division, wherever you work or whatever, even if it's not for my service, I'll just do a general PSA for because every detective sergeant and superintendent out there who works in the criminal investigations field is desperate. So understand, show an interest early and often. Own your own career. Don't wait for your service to give you what you need. Go get it. Read. I read every book on homicide I could get my hands on. Read, ask questions, be a bug. Be a bug. And put your hand up. Put your hand up. And understand that, yes, it's hard, but like you just said, you get to pick your heart, right? Pick your heart. This is hard work, but nothing on the planet in policing is more rewarding than being able to be that person that a family can look to at their worst day of their lives, and maybe be able to give them those answers that we talked about earlier. Amazing.
You heard it first from the most badass detective, Toronto Police Service, Pauline Gray. Thank you so much for being here, being with us, and 24 Shades of Blue, out.